I pushed through the revolving door of Westfield Corporate Plaza, my new employee badge already clipped to my belt. The massive lobby stretched before me with polished marble and shiny brass fixtures that screamed corporate money. My footsteps carried across the empty space as I headed for the security desk. The night manager had emailed that someone would be waiting to train me, but the desk sat empty. I checked my watch, 9:50 p.m. I was early, but not by much. "Hello?" I called out, my voice bouncing off the high ceiling. I needed this job to work out. My last position had disappeared when the tech startup I worked for went under, taking my savings with it. 3 months of unemployment had drained my bank account, and my landlord wasn't the patient type. When the staffing agency called with this night security position, no experience needed, above average pay, I jumped at it. The elevator dinged behind me, and I turned to see a man shuffle out. He wore the same navy blue uniform I had on, but his looked like he'd slept in it for days. Actually, he looked like he hadn't slept at all. Dark bags hung under his bloodshot eyes, and his skin had a sickly paleness that made me want to recommend a doctor. "You're Thompson?" he asked, his voice raspy. I nodded. "Michael. You must be David?" He didn't offer his hand, just nodded and walked to the desk. "Training should take an hour. You work midnight to 6. I've been covering double shifts until they found someone." That explained his appearance, at least partially. I followed him to the desk, where several monitors showed grayscale feeds of empty hallways and darkened office spaces. "The job's simple," David said, slumping into the chair. "Make hourly rounds through the accessible areas. Keep the logs updated. Monitor the cameras." He reached under the desk and pulled out a clipboard, holding it for a moment like he wasn't sure about handing it over. "Is there something else?" I asked. David looked up at me, his eyes focused for perhaps the first time since we'd met. "Yeah, there's something else." He placed the clipboard on the desk between us. "These are the rules, 6 of them. You need to follow them exactly, no matter what you hear or see." I picked up the clipboard. 6 handwritten rules filled the page in tight, heavy handwriting. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked, smiling. "Hayes the new guy?" David didn't smile back. "I wish it was." He wiped his eyes. "The company won't acknowledge them. They're not in any official manual. But everyone who works nights knows them." I read through the list, my smile fading. 1. Stay off the 3rd floor between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. 2. If you hear bell sounds after 3 a.m., ignore them. Don't investigate. 3. A man with a cowboy hat will come in sometimes. Let him in, but don't look directly at him. 4. If you see a boy in the lobby, don't let him leave the building. 5. Never answer the phone between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m., no matter who it sounds like. 6. At 6 a.m., check the time twice before leaving your post. "This has to be a joke," I said, but something in David's expression killed the laugh in my throat. "It's not." He leaned forward. "Listen, the official story is that this is a normal office building with normal security concerns, but it's not. Night shifts here. They break people." "Break people how?" David ran a hand through his unwashed hair. "The manager mentioned the turnover, right? Did he say why?" I nodded. "Said the hours are tough for most people." "It's not the hours." David pointed to the clipboard. "It's what happens when you break the rules." "Which is what, exactly?" David shook his head. "Just don't. Okay? Don't test them. Don't get curious. This building..." He paused, looking around like he might be overheard. "This building changes at night." I wanted to laugh it off, but the raw fear in his voice stopped me. Either this was an elaborate prank or the guy truly believed what he was saying. "I quit after tonight," David said. 4 months is enough. I've got a job lined up in another state, far away from here." "Then why not just tell me what's really going on?" "Because knowing doesn't help. Following the rules helps." He stood up. "I'll show you the rounds, the access codes, the alarm system. Then I'm done." For the next hour, David walked me through the basics of the job, The building had 20 floors, but night security only needed to check certain areas. He showed me how to use the access cards, how to log events, and where emergency equipment was stored. Through it all, he kept glancing at his watch, like he couldn't wait to leave. At 10:55 p.m., David handed me the keys. "That's it. Your shift officially starts at midnight, but I need to go." "Hey, wait," I said as he headed for the door. "Those rules, you're serious about them?" David stopped and turned. His face had somehow grown even more haggard in the short time we'd talked. "They want you to break the rules, Thompson. That's how they get you." "They? Who's they?" But David just shook his head and pushed through the revolving door out into the Chicago night. I sat at the security desk, looking at the handwritten rules. Part of me still thought this was an elaborate joke. But why would David put so much effort into scaring me? And who would joke about something that had him so scared? I decided to call the building manager, but the call went straight to voicemail. I left a message asking about the special rules for night security, trying to sound professional instead of worried. To keep busy, I made my first round of the building. The lobby level had a coffee shop, closed and dark now, and a few high-end retail spaces. The second floor had a gym for the building's tenants and more office space. As I climbed the stairs to the third floor, I remembered the first rule: stay off the third floor between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. It was only 11:15, so technically the rule didn't apply yet. I pushed through the door into another corridor of darkened offices, this one belonging to a law firm according to the directory. Nothing seemed unusual, just empty offices with city lights shining through the windows. I completed my round of the authorized areas and returned to the desk. The clock read 11:40 p.m. 20 minutes until my official shift started. I reviewed the security logs from previous nights. Most were pretty boring. Doors left unlocked, maintenance requests, routine checks. None mentioned anything unusual. If the night shift was as strange as David suggested, why wasn't it documented? At 11:50, I noticed the temperature dropping. At first, I thought it was just the building's automated climate control switching to night settings, but it kept getting colder. I could see my breath by 11:55. The building started making noises too. Not the usual settling sounds of a large structure, but something that seemed intentional. Creaks and groans that seemed to move across the ceiling. I told myself it was just the heating system or normal building sounds made louder because I was nervous. But it didn't help. As the minute hand on the lobby clock approached midnight, I checked the security monitors again. The third floor camera, which had been showing an empty hallway earlier, now showed nothing but static. I leaned closer to the screen, trying different settings to clear the image. Nothing helped. Just as the lobby clock struck midnight, the static cleared for a split second, and I could have sworn I saw something moving in that hallway. Something tall and strange looking. But then the static returned, and I was left wondering if I'd seen anything at all. I tried fixing the monitor settings, hoping to clear up the image, but nothing worked. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since lunch. The long night ahead suddenly felt even longer. I remembered seeing a break room with a coffee machine during my walkthrough with David. Where was it again? Second floor? No. Third floor. I stood up, grabbing my key card, then stopped. Rule number 1. Stay off the third floor between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. I checked my watch. 11:55 p.m. I had a few minutes. Enough time to grab coffee and come back down before midnight. What could possibly happen in 5 minutes? I took the elevator up, trying to ignore David's warnings repeating in my head. The elevator doors opened to a dark hallway on the third floor. When I stepped out, a wave of cold air hit me. Not the normal air conditioning kind of cold. This was the kind that makes your bones hurt. I checked my watch. 11:57 p.m. Still had time. The break room was down the hall to the right, if I remembered right. I walked fast, my footsteps too loud in the quiet hallway. The cold got worse with each step, and I hugged my arms against my chest. Something felt wrong up here. The shadows looked darker, everything too quiet. I checked my watch again, 11:58 p.m. Right when I found the break room door, it hit me how stupid this was. What was I doing? I'd just been told not to be on this floor after midnight, and here I was cutting it close for a cup of coffee. I turned back toward the elevator, walking faster now. That's when I heard it. A rattling sound from down the hall. One of the office doors was shaking like someone was trying to get out. The rattling got louder, the door almost jumping in its frame. 11:59 p.m. I ran. No more pretending this was normal. The rattling got louder behind me, plus there was now a low, groaning sound that definitely wasn't the building settling. The elevator was just ahead. I smashed the call button over and over, looking back over my shoulder. The rattling door was out of sight around the corner, but the sound had turned into loud banging. The elevator doors opened, and I threw myself inside, hitting the lobby button. As the doors started to close, the pounding stopped suddenly. The silence after that was worse than the noise. My watch hit 12 a.m. just as the doors shut completely. Back at the security desk, my hands shook as I checked the third-floor camera feed. The static was gone now, showing a normal, empty hallway. No sign of any rattling doors or anything weird. I spent the next hour writing down what happened in my personal notes, not in the official log. How could I report what happened without sounding crazy? More importantly, why couldn't I see the rattling door on the camera? The night went on with regular patrols of the safe areas. Every time I passed the elevators, I kept looking at the button for the third floor, glad I'd escaped whatever was up there. At 3:15 a.m., I was checking the camera feeds when I heard it. A faint tinkling sound like small bells or wind chimes. I froze, remembering the second rule. If you hear bell sounds after 3 a.m., ignore them. Don't investigate. The bells got gradually louder, coming from somewhere above me. The sound was weirdly pretty, musical notes that almost made patterns before changing again. I stood up without meaning to. The bell sounds kept going, pulling me in. They seemed to be calling just to me. My feet took me toward the elevator. My head felt foggy, unclear. All I knew was that I needed to find those bells, to see what was making that pretty sound. I pressed the elevator call button, watching the numbers light up as it came down to the lobby. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and my hand moved toward the button for the third floor. David's face popped into my head, his bloodshot eyes, the real fear as he warned me. It's what happens when you break the rules. I yanked my hand back just before touching the button, my head clearing up suddenly. What was I doing? The bells continued, but now I could hear something else under the pretty notes. Something off and wrong. I backed out of the elevator, letting the doors close without pressing any buttons. The bell sounds continued for about a minute longer, then stopped suddenly, cutting off mid-note. The sudden silence made my ears ring. I went back to the security desk and checked the monitors again. That's when I saw it. A dark shadow moving across the third-floor hallway on the camera feed. It wasn't shaped like a person, more like a dark spot sliding across the floor before disappearing into a wall. I leaned closer to the screen, but the shadow was gone. Did I imagine it? The third-floor hallway was empty again, normal under the fluorescent lights. I grabbed the clipboard with the rules, reading them again. David wasn't joking or exaggerating. The rules were real, and I'd almost broken 2 of them in one night. I spent the rest of my shift jumpy and nervous, freaking out at every sound. But nothing else weird happened before morning. While waiting for my replacement to show up, I couldn't stop thinking about what might have happened if I'd been on the third floor when the clock hit midnight, or if I'd followed those bell sounds. David's words stayed with me. They want you to break the rules. That's how they get you. I was starting to understand who or what they might be. The night had settled into a quiet rhythm. I'd completed my 4 a.m. round and checked all the security feeds. Nothing unusual in the areas I could monitor. The third-floor camera was still showing static, but I wasn't about to go up there to fix it. I leaned back in the desk chair, rubbing my eyes. 2 hours to go until my shift ended. The coffee from the second-floor break room wasn't doing much to keep me alert anymore, and each minute crawled by with excruciating slowness. The building had gone quiet again. No more strange sounds, no temperature drops, no static-filled monitors except for the third floor. Maybe the worst was over for tonight. The lobby clock showed 4:30 a.m. when I heard the front doors open. The sound made me sit up straight, instantly alert. I wasn't expecting anyone at this hour. A tall figure came in, moving weirdly smooth across the marble floor. He wore a wide-brimmed cowboy hat that covered most of his face. I immediately remembered the third rule. A man with a cowboy hat will come in sometimes. Let him in, but don't look directly at him. My eyes dropped to my desk as he came closer. I stared at the monitor in front of me, suddenly feeling nervous. I could see him out of the corner of my eye. Something about him seemed off. His arms hung too low at his sides, and his posture was way too stiff, too perfect. "Evening," he said, his voice so deep it seemed to vibrate through my chest rather than my ears. "Working late tonight?" It wasn't a question. I nodded, keeping my eyes fixed on the desk. "Yes, sir." The man stood silently at the desk. He didn't move at all, no moving of weight, no breathing I could notice. The silence stretched out uncomfortably. I felt his attention on me, making it hard to breathe. The urge to look up was almost too much. Every instinct told me to make eye contact, to see who I was talking to. My eyes started to drift upward before I caught myself and looked back down at the desk. "I need to go up," the cowboy hat man said after what felt like minutes of silence. I reached for the elevator control panel at the desk, still keeping my eyes averted. "Which floor, sir?" No answer came. I risked a quick look at his hand as he put it on the counter. His fingers were too long. The joints bent at weird angles that made my stomach turn. I quickly looked away again. I pressed the elevator call button, and the doors opened with a quiet ding that felt too loud in the silent lobby. The man walked to the elevator, moving in a weird way that didn't look right. As he went in, he turned back toward me. "Smart boy," he said as the doors closed. "Not many make it past me." The doors sealed shut, and I exhaled hard. My shirt was damp with sweat, and my hands trembled as I turned to the security monitors. I checked each floor's camera feed, trying to spot the cowboy hat man, but he didn't appear on any screen. Not on the second floor, not in any of the stairwells, not even in the elevator camera. It was like he disappeared when the doors closed. For 30 minutes, I watched the monitors. The building remained quiet, but the temperature had dropped again, cold enough that I could see my breath. I rubbed my arms, trying to warm up as I looked through each camera feed over and over. At exactly 5 a.m., the elevator dinged again. I watched on the lobby camera as the doors opened to reveal an empty car. No one got out. The doors stayed open for a long moment before closing again. Almost immediately, the cold began to go away. Within minutes, the temperature returned to normal, and I no longer needed to hug myself for warmth. I pulled out the visitor log, curious if this strange visitor had been documented before. Flipping back through the pages, I found entries for a CH man signed in at various times over the past month. Sometimes at 2 a.m., sometimes at 4 a.m., once at 3:15 a.m. Every entry was written in the same spidery handwriting. What caught my attention was that while there were sign-in times noted for every visit, there wasn't a single sign-out time recorded. Not one. I turned further back in the log, checking older entries. The pattern continued for 3 months. Then, before that, there was a different security guard's name at the top of each page, Thomas Wells. I remember David mentioning he'd been trained by the previous night guard. Putting the pieces together, I checked the date of Wells' last shift, exactly 3 months ago. The next day's log had been started by David, with a note that said Wells no-show covering shift. I dug through the desk drawers until I found an employee contact list. Thomas Wells was listed with a phone number and emergency contact. Next to his name, Someone had written "missing" in red ink. The previous guard was missing, and according to the visitor log, the cowboy hat man had started appearing right around the same time. I sat back in my chair trying to figure it out. The rules, the weird stuff happening, the missing guard. It wasn't just ghost stories or pranks. Whatever was happening in this building at night was real and dangerous. The lobby clock now read 5:10 a.m. Less than an hour left in my shift. I looked at the front doors, wondering what else might come through them before morning. The visitor log was open in front of me, and I kept staring at the entries for the cowboy hat man. I couldn't stop thinking about how he showed up right before the previous guard went missing. The sound of sniffling caught my attention. I looked up from the desk. A small boy stood in the middle of the lobby, crying. He looked about 9 years old with really pale skin that looked weird under the lobby lights. His clothes seemed oddly formal and old-fashioned. A small button-up shirt with a collar that was too stiff, short pants that ended just below his knees, and shoes that belonged in an old photo. Rule number 4 popped into my head. Don't let a boy leave the building. I stood up slowly. "Hey there, are you okay?" The boy wiped his nose with his sleeve. "Please," he said, his voice shaky. "I need to call my mom. She doesn't know where I am." Something about his voice freaked me out. It wasn't just one voice. It sounded like multiple people talking at once, on top of each other, but slightly offbeat. I tried to hide how uncomfortable I felt. "There's a phone right here you can use," I offered, gesturing to the desk phone while making sure I stayed between him and the exit doors. "But you need to stay here until morning, okay?" The boy looked at the phone, then back at me. His expression changed so fast I jumped a little. The tears were gone in an instant, replaced by pure anger. His face changed in a really weird way. "You know, don't you?" the boy hissed, his voice dropping to an adult's pitch. "The others didn't know, but you do." I gripped the edge of the desk, trying to stay calm. "I know you need to stay in the building, that's all." The boy began backing away from me, his movements jerky and unnatural. His head tilted at an angle that looked painful, while his arms hung stiffly at his sides. Each step was marked by a slight pause, like a film missing frames. "Just let me leave," he said, his voice switching back to a child's pleading tone. "Please, I'm scared. I want to go home." I stayed where I was, keeping myself between him and the exit. "I can't do that, I'm sorry." His face twisted again, rage replacing the fear. "What harm could it do?" he snarled, now sounding like an old man. "You think these rules protect you? They don't. They protect us." I didn't respond. What could I say to that? The boy kept walking backward until he reached the center of the lobby. "You'll make a mistake eventually," he said, his voice now a whisper that carried across the lobby. "Everyone does. And when you do..." The elevator dinged behind me. The boy's eyes got big with fear. His mouth opened like he wanted to scream as he stared past me at whoever was coming out of the elevator. I turned a bit, keeping an eye on the boy while looking back. The guy in the cowboy hat stepped out, way too tall for normal. I quickly looked away from him, remembering Rule 3. The boy let out a scream. It didn't sound human at all. It started high-pitched, then dropped into this deep roar that filled the whole lobby. My teeth buzzed from it, and my ears hurt bad. The boy turned and ran toward the dark reception area across the lobby, moving super fast. I couldn't see him in the dark anymore. Without thinking, I reached for the light switch on the wall beside me and flipped it on. Bright fluorescent lights lit up the reception area. It was empty. The boy had vanished. I didn't move, my hand still on the light switch. Behind me, I heard the cowboy hat guy walking slowly across the lobby to the front entrance. I kept looking at the floor as he walked by. He stopped at the door. I saw him turn a little bit toward me from the corner of my eye. He tipped his hat, then went through the revolving door and outside, where it was still dark. I stayed by the light switch for a few minutes until I calmed down. The lobby was quiet again, like nothing happened. No sign that either of them had been there except in my memory. The digital clock on the security desk read 5:58 a.m. 2 minutes until my shift ended. I watched the red numbers, my backpack already at my feet, ready to bolt as soon as the clock struck 6. After everything that had happened during the night, the cowboy hat man with his impossible proportions, the not boy who disappeared into shadows, the phone call that couldn't possibly have been my dead mother, I wanted nothing more to leave this place behind. But as I reached for my jacket, David's final rule flashed through my mind. Check the time twice before leaving at 6 a.m. I placed my jacket back on the chair and kept my eyes fixed on the clock. The red digital display changed to 5:59, and I counted the seconds silently in my head. When the numbers finally changed to 6 gao, I sighed with relief. My first night was officially over. I grabbed my backpack and stood up. Then I glanced at the clock again. It read 5:59. I blinked hard, certain I'd misread it. But the numbers remained unchanged, 5:59. I looked at my watch, which showed 6 a.m. exactly. The clock had gone backward. The air in the lobby changed. The usual subtle sounds of a large building, the buzz of electricity, the distant gurgle of pipes, the whisper of the ventilation system, all stopped. The silence felt heavy and thick. I set my backpack down and sat back in my chair, keeping my eyes on the clock. David's rule made sense now. If I had left at what appeared to be 6 a.m. the first time, what would have happened? I didn't want to find out. The clock ticked over to 6 again. I waited, counting to 60 in my head, making sure the time didn't revert once more. When it remained at 6 gone for a full minute, I began to reach for my things. The lights blinked, once, twice, 3 times, plunging the lobby into momentary darkness with each pulse. My attention shot to the security monitors. What I saw made me freeze. On each screen, in different parts of the building, stood figures looking directly into the cameras. The boy from earlier was in the second-floor hallway, his face stretched into an impossible grin. The cowboy hat man stood in the stairwell, his head tilted up toward the camera. There were others too, people or things I hadn't encountered yet. A woman in what looked like a 1940s nurse uniform stood in the parking garage, her face covered by shadows except for a wide smile. An old man in a janitor's uniform positioned himself in the eastern corridor, his eyes completely black. In the mailroom, something that resembled a large dog sat on its haunches, but its proportions were wrong. Its front legs too long, its neck bent at an unnatural angle. Every single one of them stared directly at me through the cameras. They knew I was watching them. They wanted me to know they were watching back. The phone rang. I didn't move. It was past 2 a.m. now, so technically the 5th rule no longer applied. But after what had happened earlier, I had no intention of answering that phone ever again, regardless of the time. The temperature dropped so quickly that my breath clouded in front of my face. The cold bit through my uniform, making my teeth chatter. Frost began to form on the lobby windows again, crawling across the glass in fractal patterns. The ringing stopped after 8 rings, but nothing else changed. The figures on the monitors remained motionless, staring. The silence hung heavy in the air. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 15. I couldn't feel my fingers anymore, but I didn't dare move. Something told me that movement of any kind would be dangerous now. This was a test, the final test of the night. On the monitors, the figures began to move, not toward their respective cameras, but toward the lobby. The boy skipped down the hallway toward the elevator. The cowboy hat man climbed the stairs upward. The nurse walked toward the service entrance. The janitor moved toward the main corridor that connected to the lobby. The dog thing bounded out of frame. They were coming for me. The clock still read 6 Siri. My watch now showed 6:22 a.m. Time in the building had stopped, but the real world outside continued on. I gripped the edges of my chair, my knuckles white. I could run. The front doors were only 30 feet away, but something told me I wouldn't make it. Not with time frozen at 6 a.m., not with them converging on the lobby. The lights blinked again, longer this time, leaving me in darkness for several seconds before returning. When they came back on, the monitors showed empty hallways. All the figures had disappeared from view. I felt panic rising in my chest. They were close now, maybe already in the lobby with me, hidden in the shadows. The digital clock suddenly jumped from 6 to 6:30 a.m. The change was instant. No gradual progression through the minutes. At the same moment, warmth flooded back into the room. The frost on the windows melted away. The background noises of the building resumed as if someone had turned up the volume. The front doors swung open, and a woman in the same navy blue security uniform walked in. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she carried a travel mug of coffee. She looked alert and well-rested, nothing like David had. "You must be Michael," she said, approaching the desk. "I'm Jennifer Martinez, day shift." I stared at her, unable to speak for a moment. After the night I'd had, the casual normalcy of her entrance seemed absurd. "How was your first night?" she asked, setting her coffee down on the desk. I pushed the clipboard with David's rules toward her. "They're real," I said simply. Jennifer nodded, unsurprised. "Some nights are quiet, some aren't." She glanced at the rules, then back at me. "You followed them all?" "Yes," I said. "Then you'll be back tonight," she stated, not as a question but as a fact. I opened my mouth to deny it, to tell her I quit, but the words wouldn't come. Even after all I'd seen, even with fear making my hands shake, I knew she was right. I would come back. Something about this building had gotten under my skin. The mysteries it held, the rules for nighttime hours, the things that roamed the halls after dark. I needed to understand them. Plus, people needed to be warned. If I quit, someone else would take my place, someone who might not have David's rules to help them. "Yeah," I said finally. "I'll be back." Jennifer smiled slightly. "Get some rest. You'll need it." I grabbed my things and went to the front doors. The morning sun came through the glass, warm and nice. As I pushed through the revolving door into the cool morning air, I thought about the cowboy hat man, the boy, and all the other things waiting in the building behind me. They would be ready for me tonight, waiting for me to make a mistake, waiting for me to break a rule. I walked to my car, planning to come back before dark. Next time I would be ready too.